students, this is Payal ma'am here. So in the previous video, we have already discussed about the terrestrial plants. So in this video, we are going to discuss about the aquatic plants and the cultivated plants. So without any further ado, let us dive into the topic. Now, what are aquatic plants? So many plants grow in ponds, lakes, and other water bodies. Such plants found in water are called as aquatic plants. So the term aqua, it means water. So that's how the word aquatic has got originated. So aquatic plants are all those plants which we found growing on the water. Now, aquatic plants are mainly of two types. So let us see what are they. Now, floating aquatic plants are also categorized into two further subtypes. So the first one is free floating plants. So water lettuce, water hyacinth and duckweed are found floating freely on water. They are not attached to any surface. Now these plants have got air-filled cavities in their leaves and stems. These cavities make them light and help them to easily float on water. So they have got hollow spaces, means they have got empty spaces which are called as cavities, and these cavities inside the plant, that is inside the leaves and inside the stem, are filled with air, which makes them light and it helps them to float on water. That's why they are called as free floating plants. So water hyacinth, water lettuce and duckweed. Duckweed is the smallest flowering plant. So the next category are the fixed aquatic plants. Now why they are called as fixed aquatic plants? Because plants like lotus and water lily, these are attached to the pond bed. Means they are attached to the base of the pond. That's why they are called fixed aquatic plants. Now these plants have stems with holes and their leaves are broad. The stem of lotus, commonly known as kamal kakdi, is eaten as a vegetable. So the stem of kamal kakdi is edible and it can be eaten as vegetable. Now the second category of aquatic plants are the underwater plants. So hydrilla is an example of a plant that grows under water. So it has pointed and strap-like leaves. So this is how the plant hydrilla looks like. As you can see, it is found floating inside the water. Okay, it is completely submerged or inside the water. So there's an interesting fact about hydrilla. It increases the oxygen content of water and it removes carbon dioxide from it. So since it is submerged or it is fully found under the water, so it releases, as you know that plants take up carbon dioxide and they release out oxygen. So all of its oxygen gets added into the water, increasing the oxygen content, and this helps in making water suitable for fish and other aquatic animals which needs oxygen to survive or to breathe. Okay, so students, just see this diagram in which they have clearly shown the difference between a free floating and a rooted floating. Rooted floating here is a fixed aquatic plant. So can you see in the fixed aquatic plant, the roots are attached or they are holding on to the soil bed or the pond bed. Whereas the free floating plants, they are just floating on the surface of the water. Now moving on with the next topic for the day, which is the cultivated plants. So first let us understand what are basically the cultivated plants. So these plants cannot grow all by themselves. We need to grow them. They cannot naturally grow all by themselves. We need to sow the seeds or help in them growing up. It cannot be grown naturally all by itself. So cultivated plants are plants that are planted and grown rather than growing naturally. So these plants do not grow naturally until and unless someone grows them. So the examples of cultivated plants are rice, wheat, sugarcane, and maize. Now, while growing these cultivated plants, all of a sudden, by certain agents, there are some few undesirable plants also which start growing along with the cultivated plants. Now, these are undesirable, means nobody wants to grow them. All of a sudden, they grow all by themselves and they start competing with the resources needed by the crops to grow. So they hinder or they prevent the growth of the plants in a healthy manner. They reduce the crop yield, means they reduce the crops produce. So that's why it is very essential to remove the weeds from the fields every now and then. At every regular intervals, we need to remove out the weeds, or we can even provide weedicides to kill these growth of the weeds. So if a definition of weeds is asked, then you will write that weeds are the undesirable plants which can harm the growth of cultivated plants. So, how do farmers grow plants for cultivation? Now that's a question. We understood that cultivated plants needs to be grown. But how does the farmer grow these cultivated plants? So let us have a look. So first the farmer needs to prepare the soil where the crops or the cultivated plants needs to be grown. And that process of preparing the soil for cultivating the crops is known as plowing. So plowing is the process of loosening the soil and turning it over for uprooting the weeds and also aerating the soil. Here aerating means adding air to the soil. So when you turn the soil up and down, so naturally what happens? The air in the atmosphere, it goes down and gets mixed in the soil. And we know already that the roots also need to breathe, right? So that air they are going to get from the air which is going to be mixed with the soil. So this loosening of the soil helps the roots of the crops to penetrate the soil easily. So why do we need to loose the soil? So loosening is done in order to make way for the roots to reach deep into the ground. So if we do not prepare or we do not plow the field, then what will happen? The roots will not get space to go deep inside the soil. Plowing is done with an iron structure which is called as plow. Now plowing can be done either manually, that is when people all by themselves they do the work of plowing, or it can be done mechanically, that is by using a tractor which has got a plow attached to it. So it can help in doing all by machines. So either it can be done manually or mechanically. Mostly these days it is done mechanically only to increase the crop yield or increase the production of crops at a faster rate. Now once plowing is done, so after the soil is prepared, we need to sow the seeds. For that, what the farmer does is he starts sprinkling the seeds. So he needs to be taking care that the seeds need to fall down at regular intervals in the field. So at regular distances, the seeds need to be sown. Sowing of seeds is done. After that, the farmer needs to irrigate or water the fields, and not just after sowing the seeds. He needs to water them or irrigate the field throughout the cultivation of the crops. So that process is termed as irrigation. So watering of crops is termed as irrigation. Now this irrigation is generally done either by sprinklers. So this is what are sprinklers, where through pipes the water is sprinkled to the crops. Now, in order to conserve or reduce the wastage of water, these days even drip irrigation is done. Drip irrigation, in this process, small pipes reach up to the plants and the water is let into the plants drop-wise in order to reduce the wastage of water. Now once all this is done, finally after a few months or a few days, the crops become ready to be harvested. So after harvesting, they are processed and then we can readily use them. So cultivated crops are very important for us because growing them not only brings revenue or money to the farmers, but it also brings us food to eat. And during this lockdown, we have understood the value of food, isn't it? So that's how we have learned how the crops are cultivated. Now let us watch a small video to see how the paddy or rice is cultivated.
Mommy, what are they eating?
They're eating rice.
What's rice?
It's a seed from the rice plant, a grain that is very common and popular all over the world.
And how do you make rice?
Rice is a very unique plant, and there are many different ways to help it grow. Regardless, it needs a lot of water, which usually runs very slowly and very shallowly through the fields, called paddy fields. The water is heated by the sun and keeps the small, delicate plants warm at night. Otherwise, while they're still very young, they would freeze. To create a rice field, the ground must be perfectly level. For this, very strong tractors with strong blades are needed. These blades use a ray of red light, called a laser, to stay in the right position. To cultivate the rice, each year the tractors must first plow the field, and then use a special machine to make the ground soft, so that the little plants can sprout and grow well, but also compact deeper down, so that the water remains in the field for as long as possible. Then the rice fields are covered with water, and the earth turns to mud. At this point, to plant the seeds and spread the fertilizer, which the little plants need for nourishment, special narrow wheels are attached to the tractors. These wheels cut through the layer of mud and rest on the hard ground underneath, which has been compacted during the plowing phase. Then we wait for the sprouted plants to grow with the sunlight and air, so that they ripen well. At this point, the water is removed, and the combine harvester enters the field to harvest the rice, gathering the stalks and separating the grains. Lastly, the grains are refined. They turn white and are ready to be cooked and eaten.
Yippee! I get it! And now I'm gonna go plow the field.